Hey there, and welcome. So, if you're anything like me, you're probably a little tired of all the fad diets and the workout plans that promise the world but don't really stick. Well, today, we're going to look at something completely different. It's a systematic approach to well-being called biohacking. So let's dive in and see what it's really all about.
So what in the world is biohacking? Well, at its heart, it's all about the optimization of your performance, your health, and your well-being. And that word, optimization, is absolutely key. This isn't about some quick fix or a magic pill. It's about using real science, technology, and most importantly, a deep understanding of your own body to make small, powerful, and sustainable upgrades.
But you know, it's not just a science. It's also an art. I just love this quote. The idea that the sculpture in this whole process is you. It really changes how you look at it, right? It's not some rigid set of rules you have to follow. It's this creative, personal journey of self-improvement that's going to look totally different for every single one of us.
Okay, so how does this whole thing actually work in practice? Well, to really get biohacking, you first have to kind of wrap your head around its core philosophy, which is all about thinking in systems. And this really requires a major shift in how we usually think about health. See, most of the health advice we get is reductionist. It zooms in on one single thing, like one specific gene or one vitamin. But biohacking, it's holistic. It zooms out to look at the big picture, how all these complex things in our environment, what scientists call epigenetics, actually control how our entire system works together. So, how do we start to navigate this super complex system that is our body? Well, biohackers often use a pretty cool model that breaks it all down into 4 simple stages. First, you have the input. That's everything that goes into your body, like food, light, even information. Second, there's the process, how your body actually uses all that stuff. Third, you get an output. That's the result, right? Your energy levels, your performance, your overall health. And fourth, and this is the most important part, the feedback loop. You look at the output to figure out what your next input should be. It's a way to systematically see cause and effect in your own body.
All right, that's enough theory for now. Let's make this real. Let's see how this all works by looking at one of the most fundamental systems you can possibly upgrade, your sleep. You know, it's a question we probably don't ask ourselves enough. We all know we feel pretty terrible after a rough night. But why does sleep really matter so much? To really see the huge impact it has, let's just look at a quick story.
So meet John. And let's be honest, we've all been John before. A single night of bad sleep just snowballs into a total disaster. His productivity at work is in the tank, he bombs his big presentation, and the entire day just feels like an uphill battle. This isn't just him being in a bad mood, it's a complete systemic failure. And it all started with one bad input, a night of poor sleep.
So how could John fix this? Well, the very first step, the first input he can control, is his light environment. Light is an incredibly powerful signal that basically tells our body when it's time to be awake and when it's time to wind down. And here are some super simple, actionable ways to do that. That blue light from our phones and computer screens is the main villain here because it totally tricks our brain into thinking it's still daytime. That's why just shutting them down an hour before bed is an absolute game changer. You can also get apps or special glasses that filter out that blue light. And get this is pretty wild. Even bright moonlight can be enough to mess with your melatonin production, which is your body's natural sleep hormone.
Okay, the second key lever you can pull is temperature. For us to get into and stay in a deep sleep, our body temperature actually needs to drop a little bit. And the good news is, we can help that process along. So, how do we do that? Well, for one, try to avoid any intense exercise right before bed, since that raises your core temperature. A much better idea would be to try something like a cool shower in the evening to signal to your body that it's time to cool down. And hey, maybe the simplest hack of all is to just try sleeping naked. It really helps your body regulate its temperature. See, small changes to your inputs can lead to really big changes in your outputs.
All right, let's move on to our next big system, nutrition. Because as the old saying goes, you are what you eat. But maybe more accurately, you are what you can actually absorb. So this is Mary, and her day probably looks pretty familiar to a lot of us, right? It's filled with easy, convenient choices. Some yogurt, a banana, a simple sandwich. But let's look at the output she's getting. Restlessness, brain fog, and just plain old fatigue. These aren't just random symptoms happening to her. They are the direct result of the inputs she's been choosing.
But here's the twist. It's not just about what Mary eats, it's also about how her food is prepared. The reason is that a lot of seemingly healthy plant foods, like grains and legumes, contain something called anti-nutrients. These are natural compounds that can literally grab onto essential minerals. We're talking zinc, iron, magnesium, and block your body from being able to absorb them.
And the effect of this is absolutely staggering. Let's take quinoa, for example. If you just cook it straight up, you reduce a common anti-nutrient called phytate by maybe 20%. But now, look at this. If you add in simple traditional steps like soaking it overnight or fermenting it before you cook it, you can get rid of up to 98% of those anti-nutrients. You are literally unlocking a massive amount of nutrition from the exact same food.
So the huge takeaway here is that how you cook your food matters just as much as what food you cook. As a general rule, you want to favor methods that are gentle, methods that preserve nutrients. Think slow and low, like slow cooking, steaming, or stewing. Or you can use methods that let beneficial microbes do the heavy lifting for you, like fermentation.
And on the flip side, there are some methods you probably want to use a lot less. Pretty much anything that involves super high temperatures, like frying, grilling, or deep frying, can actually create harmful compounds while destroying the delicate nutrients in your food. It all comes back to that simple idea. Maximize the good inputs and minimize the bad ones.
Okay, this all brings us to the final and honestly the most important step in this whole biohacking process, becoming your own expert.
This quote just nails it. It says that all the science, all the expert advice in the world, it's all just an informed guess until you actually test it on yourself. What works wonders for one person might do absolutely nothing for you. The only way to know for sure what works is through your own personal experimentation.
And that's really the ultimate message here. Biohacking isn't about blindly following some guru on the internet. It's about taking the principles of science and applying them to the most important subject you will ever study, yourself. You become both the scientist and the experiment, systematically figuring out what inputs lead to the best outputs for your unique system. So I guess the real question is, what's the first experiment you're going to run?
If this topic has captured your interest and you'd like to dive deeper, the book is called Biohacker's Handbook by Olli Sovijärvi, Teemu Arina, and Jaakko Halmetoja.